GEM, the Group for Education in Museums, is a cause and an organisation very close to my heart. They've been doing a lot of work recently on the future of museum learning. So we've got Rachel and Cara, who are going to talk to us about that. There is time for questions afterwards. So they're going to talk for about half an hour, and then we'll have 10 minutes for questions. So do save up your questions. I'm going to hand over to you, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Janra. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Shall we have a little cheer? You all right this morning? Yay, brilliant. So I'm Rachel Tranter. I'm Director of GEM. As you may know, GEM is the Group for Education in Museums. It's actually our 75th year this year, so we're a very well-established sector support organisation. Here for everybody involved in delivering learning, no matter what your role is, no matter what your organisation is, across the breadth of museums, heritage and cultural organisations. We're basically here for you. Last year, we were absolutely delighted to join the Arts Council National Portfolio for the first time. So we are now at what's called an IPSO, Investment Principal Support Organisation. And as part of that work, we've been doing a lot of research into the kind of current state of museum learning, which Cara's been leading on, and she's going to share her findings with you. Just before we start, I just want to do a little shout out. We've got a lot of team members here today. So Robin, who looks after Wales, shout out. Welsh Project. Leanna, who looks after operations. Shannon, who's our engagement manager, looking after the IPSO programme. Kathy, our trustee, was at the back. Melissa, who looks after mentoring and leadership courses and lots of other things. So if you want to come and chat to us later, we've got a stand X2 just straight over there. So just without further ado, this report and our findings, this is the first time really that there's been an in-depth study into what's happening with museum learning, probably since the Commonwealth that David Anderson wrote. So it's been a long time coming, and we've got some really, really interesting findings. I'm going to hand over first to Cara Blackman Wescombe, who's been leading on the research, and then Rach Moss, who has been looking at specific area to do with work experience and work placements. We'll follow on from that, and then we'll take some questions. So without further ado, Cara, thank you.
Hi, can you all hear okay? Yeah. Well, hello, and thank you very much for coming along to hear about the research that we've been carrying out this year. So who took part? 67 GEM members, thank you very much, and 32 non-GEM members. 60 museum and heritage professionals took part. 2 roundtable discussions took place online with heads of learning services. And where were they from? Well, we heard from people from across the 4 nations, including 18 Arts Council for England Levelling Up for Culture Places, 10 Arts Council England National Portfolio organisations, and 2 sector support organisations. And what did we want to find out? Well, the primary purpose of this research was to find out what the needs of museum learning practitioners were, so then GEM could plan its services and support. And our key priorities were what is going well and what challenges are being experienced, how are practitioners engaging with current sector themes of equality, diversity and inclusion, environmental responsibility, and digital, key themes for all of us in this sector. We wanted to find out how about what career and progression routes are available and the barriers to these, and we looked at key themes and topics driving strategy and planning. And finally, we asked GEM members what support GEM could give in future. So what did people tell us? They told us, and this might be familiar to you, that since the COVID-19 pandemic, they had had an opportunity for a reset, to rethink their public programmes and become more audience-focused. For example, including more flexible offers for schools so that they could come as whole year group visits and make that more affordable for them. They also talked about how digital had enabled them to work in new ways with schools and community groups, both on-site and remotely, offering greater flexibility and access to audiences taking part in programmes, particularly those who are carers or who couldn't travel. And for museum workers, digital access has also enabled them flexibility. to attend meetings and training and to work from home, which was especially welcome when they often work at weekends, those of you working in museums and galleries, evenings, bank holidays, school holidays. And finally, they really valued the support that the sector gave them through GEM, AIM, Museums Association, and other memberships that they were part of. And more than one said to me, GEM had offered a lifeline during COVID pandemic, and especially since museum cuts. And what did they tell us about what was challenging? Well, it may be no surprise to hear that the top four were funding and how they felt learning was valued in museum sector, salaries and fees, career routes, and progression. Interviewees said that the challenges they were experiencing had been made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic, but they were really keen to tell me that this was prevalent before and that too often they felt COVID-19 pandemic was used as a reason for the cuts that they were experiencing. A key issue for them was the over-reliance on external funding for learning and engagement work, which often competed with commercial activities, preventing roles and work with communities ever feeling truly secure or embedded in their organisation. Unstable fees, salaries and contracts, as well as limited opportunities for progression, were prominent and affected career appeal and viability. The cost of living was also having an impact on audience engagement, particularly school and family audiences, with schools unable to cover the cost of the ratio of adult children needs and the cost of coaches. And when we surveyed recent publications and asked research participants what they were thinking about in their work and what was driving their planning and strategy, they said early years, up to 18, was a key area for them, primarily because of rising concerns about the effects of the cost of living on children accessing museums and heritage and the impact of this in the future. Research participants also felt that this was a fragile funding area, for most were dependent on funding in order to remove barriers for those who would otherwise be excluded from engaging. The second theme was local. Although museum and heritage learning professionals have long worked in the area of health and well-being and place-based work, this is not new to us. They said that this had been reinforced since the COVID-19 pandemic. Participants gave interesting examples of asking communities how they could be supported rather than imposing projects on them, thereby helping tackle issues related to health, well-being and poverty. Examples included museums collaborating on the provision of food banks, warm spaces, and bringing museum collections and activities out to community settings such as job centres. Increasing diversity in the sector and audiences was a key theme of discussions. Participants reported significant progress in the past 2 years, but they felt that there was still a lot of progress to be made, and that learning and engagement practitioners were often the drivers of this work. In addition, some had themselves experienced discrimination in their career progression and felt that talent and experience was being overlooked. Questions in our survey about environmental responsibility received a really high response rate, indicating significant engagement with this topic, with 84% saying that their learning work included environmental responsibility content, but that they were keen for further learning-specific training from policy awareness to practical activities, such as working with community activist groups. And when asked about digital technology in their work, 70% of the research survey participants said that they used it to deliver downloadable digital learning resources, 65% to deliver online streaming sessions, 56% to engage with online audiences and to deliver pre-recorded content. However, the majority of participants said that their digital work had de-accelerated since the COVID-19 pandemic, and the most common barriers they cited included practical infrastructure, such as poor Wi-Fi, lack of budgets for upgrades, and no technical support. Some also talked about local digital poverty, which was really interesting to us, meaning that they were prioritising in-person work and that schools wanted on-site visits. So what did participants ask for? Well, firstly, they asked for increased advocacy for learning and engagement work, specifically around highlighting to statutory funders, trusts and foundations the challenges of short-term funding and lack of multi-year funding, and to challenge unfair salaries and fees. There was also a call to highlight the needs of schools and to raise the issue of travel costs at policy level, as well as future funding for museum and schools programmes. It was also viewed as important that there was collaboration between the sector support organisations when it came to advocacy, something that already happens but that we must continue. Professional development needs really varied between early career practitioners and experts. When asked what progression support would be most valuable, 48% said leadership training, 32% said coaching, 32% said work experience at another museum, 30% said mentoring, 20% said formal qualifications, and 14% work experience in another related sector. As the scope of learning and engagement work really expands, administrative and business skills were seen as increasingly important, including finance and advocacy, such as writing impact reports. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. There was also demand for practical experience and back to basics training, from object handling and learning theory to working with schools and creating learning resources. Are we on the right one? Yeah. I think I'll move on to that one. Opportunities for networking and collaboration were considered a key motivation for becoming a member of an organisation like GEM. Many of the research participants asked for increased informal opportunities to network and to join subject networks. There was also demand for hyper-local support in areas such as apprenticeships, sector secondments, and facilitating cross-sector partnerships, such as between health and heritage. And so what did we conclude? Well, firstly, to amplify GEM's services and impact. GEM already provides much of what the sector needs: professional development, training, networking, knowledge exchange, and place-based cross-sector programmes, as well as advocacy. And this is really valued by its members. Secondly, to host subject-based networks addressing museum and heritage learning career routes, health and well-being, schools and teachers, and digital learning innovation. Third, continue to advocate for the value of museum learning in the cultural and education sectors, and for fair pay and contracts for sector employees. And with sector partners, explore how issues like the cost of school travel to museums could be addressed. GEM can also work in collaboration with museum and heritage sector partners to support work-based learning, driving this change through schools, engagement, and place-based interventions. Fourth, continue to build a dynamic and accessible in-person and online professional development service from foundation to leadership. And finally, to focus on strategic place-based support through specific interventions that address needs identified in our report. There are many opportunities for museums to be the kind of organisation that their local places need, providing cultural entitlement for children and young people embedded in local community, supporting sustainable development, enhancing and enriching lives. Museum learning should be a must-have, a fundamental human right, and it's everyone's responsibility, and yours included, to make that possible, not just for some postcodes, but for every postcode across the UK. So what are we doing now with this research? Well, our findings are already, I'm very pleased to say, informing GEM's future programmes and their planning as an IPSO. And we'll be publishing our report in the next week or so on gem.org.uk, and we welcome additional content. We recognise that this is a really fast-moving sector with fiscal and political changes having an impact at quite an unusual rate. And so we want our research to stay current. We're also going to be hosting roundtable discussions in the autumn and spring to see whether the picture has changed, to ensure that GEM's work stays relevant, and so that we can keep you up to date with the sector's needs and challenges. Thank you very much for listening, and our contact details are at the end, so you can talk to me further at the end. But I'd like to now hand over to Rachel Moss, who's going to talk more about careers and progression routes. Thank you. Are you okay with that one? Yep.
Thank you, Cara. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Cool. So my name's Rachel Moss, and I'm a freelancer. I'm working with GEM on research, which is around work experiences work placements and inclusive pathways. And I might have spoken to some of you already, but if I haven't and you're keen to speak to me, I'm here today. Would love to hear from you. So who have I spoken to already? These organisations have included people working with primary schools, like the charity I Can Be, those with clear progression routes, like the South London Gallery, those working with deaf, disabled and neurodiverse participants, like Careers for All in Leeds and Curating for Change, and those offering work placements online, such as Historic England, as well as hybrid and in-person opportunities. For the GEM survey, I'm going to be sharing statistics and feedback shortly. The briefing events, they will lead on to 5 GEM area meetings across the UK for dissemination and input from a wide range of museum and heritage professionals. And earlier this week, we already had one meeting with GEM East. The London Network meetings that are mentioned on the slide with the Secondary Learning Network and the Young People's Programmers Network. This is a quote from one of the research participants. And we know from talking to young people and to museum learning professionals and teachers and youth workers that young people need work experience and placement opportunities more than ever. The research I've been doing is against a backdrop of existing government schemes and initiatives and research on work experience and youth employability or unemployability. For example, existing government schemes and initiatives include the DfE Careers Strategy, Skills for Jobs, and the technical qualification reform, including T-levels, government traineeships, apprenticeships, and higher technical qualifications. Research on work experience and youth employability or unemployability include Speakers for Schools Work Experience for All, the Youth Voice Census 2023, and Education Select Committee's report on Career Education 2023. And on the screen, you can see some statistics from the Prince's Trust NatWest Youth Index, which came out in February 2024. So when I started this work back in June, July last year, we came up with some definitions. We thought it was important to define what we meant by work experience, work placements, and inclusive pathways. So we came up with a definition that work experience tends to be short-term, lasting between a few days and a few weeks. Work placements usually range from a few months to a year. And inclusive pathways break down the barriers to entering the museums and heritage sector. And I'm quite happy to talk through those with people later. People might have slightly different definitions, but that's what we've come up with. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things we did was send a survey out to GEM members, which was in autumn. And it should just be noted that when looking at these statistics, individuals who responded, we think, are likely to have had an interest in this area already, who've already been doing this kind of work or might have been doing it already. So you can see the percentages are quite high. So, for example, the first percentage, 82% offer work experience and 12% used to but currently don't. We are aware that 82% of museums and galleries and heritage organisations aren't likely to be offering this, but the ones that we were speaking to were telling us this. Equally, where you can see 0% for organisations running online work experience opportunities and 0% for primary school opportunities, we know that there are organisations doing that. It's just in our respondents. We didn't have any. Also, we asked people who are the opportunities aimed at, and you can see the list here. 35% said that they were either not targeting specifically or weren't specifically working with any of the above. But some organisations were targeting, for example, deaf, disabled or neurodiverse young people, or care experienced young adults, or those with other protected characteristics. Barriers and challenges. This is a word cloud that we created at the beginning of the GEM webinar that we ran in February. But the barriers and challenges were very similar in the survey findings, which covered, for example, staff capacity, especially within small teams or where there are part-time staff, administration and hosting being time-consuming. There was more demand than possible for hosting placements, particularly when schools are asking for them at the same time of the year. Lack of budgets versus wanting to pay people for their time, unless it's a school work experience. You know, organisations want to be able to pay their young people who come in. Safeguarding requirements when hosting individuals under age 18. Learning staff often being the hosts rather than other departments, and trying to get HR, human resources, a bit more involved so that it wasn't just learning all the time being responsible. The interest from young people often is to become curators. They've met curators, they've met front of house people, they've met museum education people, but the young people don't actually know what other jobs are available, or the skills or the routes in that they need. Training other staff was another barrier so that they feel comfortable working with young people. Confidence that there is a sufficient support from the student, school or college. More staff working at home, so it's harder to host students if you're not there in person. And the cost of living crisis has affected some students. Some will need paid jobs alongside their placements if the placements aren't actually paid. And finally, the importance of making placements meaningful. People are keen to do things, but they only want to do it if they can actually do something properly. So after we'd looked at barriers in a lot of these sessions and in the GEM survey, we asked people, what would you like from GEM? What kind of support would you like? And we'd love to hear from you if you haven't already fed into this. Some of the suggestions from GEM members during the survey and the various discussions included case studies, templates, you know, simple things like schedules, timetables that we can adapt in our organisations. Advocacy for inclusive recruitment. Where do we advertise? How do we reach the right people, rather than it just being the independent school down the road applying for work placements? How to get buy-in from other staff. And already people have said some of the statistics we've shared from the GEM survey or from wider research findings have been useful, just to take to staff and look, say to them, this is why we need to do it, we're making the case. And support for well-being of staff hosting placements. I think sometimes people don't realise how time-consuming it is, how much emotional energy people put in, and just having that understanding from other staff. Some people have suggested creating a kind of network or a space where people can connect and share any opportunities or have advice. Also, the idea of linking museums together. Maybe you work in a small museum, maybe you're part-time, but if you worked with another museum down the road, you'd be able to offer something between the two of you. Signposting to training providers and local careers hubs, where there's loads of free support going on. And members were also interested in more about measuring impact and alternative kind of evaluation tools. So here is another couple of quotes. The first one is from the GEM survey, and the second one is a phrase that I really like, which is, you can't be what you can't see. I've sort of referenced this earlier, but I think often we'll say to young people, you know, would you like to work in a museum? They have absolutely no idea what is available to them. So how can you be something when you can't see it? And this came from one of our network meetings that somebody said this. So just to wrap up, next steps, we're going to be creating, or I'm going to be creating an online toolkit, including case studies and templates. There are loads of really good resources already existing online. If anybody has a template that they would love to share, that would be amazing as well. We could include that. I'm going to be working with the GEM area nation reps, which I talked about a bit before. We're going to be publishing an Inclusive Pathways edition of case studies early in 2025. So look out for a call out in autumn. And I'm going to be identifying continued support for GEM members. So we'd like to keep the conversations going. So please do get in touch. We're going to have email addresses at the end of our presentation today. And also we're going to be in the learning networking session at 1:00. So please do come and say hello. I'm going to pass over to Rachel Tranter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rach. Can I just have a round of applause for Rach and Cara? They've done an enormous amount of work over the last year. Really delighted to be working with you. Thank you. So I think just as was mentioned earlier, we're already responding. We're already doing a lot of work in this area. We've got the established mentoring, one-to-one mentoring program, all of the EDI training that we're doing at the moment. So qualities, diversity, inclusion training, that is. The place-based support and focus that we've got at the moment around levelling up places, case studies, as Rachel mentioned. GEM conference, big shout out. So we're going to be in Bristol this year. It's going to be the place to be. We have the most exciting keynote that we haven't announced yet. So yeah, watch this space to see who's coming to GEM conference. So September, is it 11th, 12th, 11th, 12th, 13th September in Bristol. So we're going to be at M Shed. Very exciting because Colston's downstairs. So do come and join. Lots of focus on training, leadership programs. We've got loads and loads of courses now up and running. We've got a new environmental responsibility course being led by Kathy Moore and Melissa Maynard, and that's actually open for booking starting in January. So have a look at that one. We have lots of bursaries available for conference, for training, sort of everything that we're doing. Also, big shout out to our volunteers. We've got Rachel from UCL who's here. Thank you for your hard work. And also we're carrying on with this research. So like the activities that we've started last year, we're carrying on through our EPSO work. I'd also just like to introduce you to Katya, who's our communications manager, has been doing an enormous amount of work supporting all of this program. So do catch you later. And if you aren't signed up to the e-updates, do so. If you want to find out about membership, come and find us a bit later. And just the last slide is who to talk to. So we've got contact details for Rach and Cara. So yeah, be part of the continuing conversation around this area of work. Thanks very much, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. So if that's great, Cara and Rachel come back to the lectern. So questions, we've got a good 10 minutes now. So anything that they haven't covered, just give me a wave if you've got a question and I'll come over to you with the mic. Anyone? While you're thinking, I'm sure you've got lots of questions. You've had lots to digest. I had one. I was just struck by the I know that you looked at leadership a lot, and I just wondered if you have a feel for, you may not have the stats, but one of the things that I think the sector needs more of is senior leaders, directors coming up through from the education pipeline. I wondered if you had a sense of how that's going. Is that happening?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. That's a really good question. We did, when we had the roundtable discussions with head of learning services and other support organisations, it was one of the key things that was sort of identified, that there are people who've come from learning and engagement backgrounds, that are directors, that are in senior positions in policy, but there is an opportunity for more. And they sort of bring a unique, diverse skill set. And so that's why the leadership comes across so strongly in our surveys and in our research as something that people need and want, because they feel that that might be an opportunity to move into that sort of role and for it to be recognised. Yeah. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. And yes, just come over to you.
In the capacity of this question, I am talking from the point of view of being a freelancer and freelance consultant. I wanted to ask a question about what GEM could do or might be interested in hearing about. For me, there's a real lack of senior management and leadership from disabled, neurodiverse and deaf people in the sector, which is so deeply ingrained. And there is a lot of talk, but I'm not seeing the trousers anywhere. I personally struggle to access senior leadership jobs because they won't consider job shares, they won't consider access requirements. And, you know, it's something I'm really passionate about to the point where I've thought about starting a campaign, but I really don't have the capacity or time for that as someone that ends up working about 6 days a week at the moment. But yeah, I just wanted to know if there's any plans to do anything around that, because I think really there needs to be a massive systemic change that just is not happening. I took this issue to the Claw Leadership program, and I was shortlisted, but I wasn't selected. And yeah, you know, it's something that I'm really trying to voice and get out there, because I think it's really important.
Thanks. Great question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an excellent question. Actually, if you read the report when we publish it, you'll see so many other comments like that. I think it's really, really vital. And it was one of the absolute crucial things that came out of the research was about diverse leadership in all its forms. Because like the quote that Rach Moss just shared with us about, you can't be what you can't see. It's so relevant in our roles. So thank you for sharing that. I think it'd be really nice to chat to you after this session, and maybe with Rachel Tranter as well. It is really core to our report, but there's definitely room to make it stronger. We can add another voice into that. So thank you for sharing it.
And also just to say that I know there's a lot of expertise in the room as well. So if I don't know if anyone else has got reflections on that question or anything to add, do feel free to chip in. No, but do catch them and have a talk to them afterwards. Any other questions coming through? Yes.
I don't know. Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Jackie. I freelance for several museums: British Museum, National Portrait Gallery, St John Soane Museum. There's it just occurs to me, and I might be completely wrong. Is there enough done for young carers? Because it might be in my imagination, but I'm just wondering whether there's enough for young carers, maybe just as an outlet for therapy, therapeutic, for relaxation. Is there any art therapy? You know, it's just like a group of society that I'm just not sure enough is done for. But as I say, possibly there is, and I'm just a bit out the loop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It didn't actually come up massively in the research, but it is a really important area. And I think organisations like the Foundling Museum do a lot of work around that in terms of how we, the provision in our learning programmes and how we work with young carers. I've worked with young carers for sort of 20 years. So I think it's a really important area. In terms of young carers in the workforce, I think that's a really interesting question. It might be something that Rach Moss has come across in her research, but thank you for raising it. I don't know if you want to add something.
So just looking at the statistics from the survey, and this is just out of 49 people who responded, 16% said they were aiming the work experience opportunities directly at young carers. I mean, I know a couple of examples of places that are working with them, but you know, maybe it's something we could find out more about. Definitely. I don't know. Is there anybody else in the room who's working with young carers?
Yeah, let's have a show of hands. If anyone's
up?
organisations working directly, targeting anything at young carers.
Otherwise, I might
It's
be able to point
interesting,
you
isn't it?
in the direction of a couple of people afterwards, if that's helpful. Just while I've got the mic for 1 minute, how many people are actually offering work experience or work placement opportunities in their organisations? Quite a lot of you.
Great.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay.
Oh, can you please put your hands up again so that Katja can get a picture? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Rachel, get a
Brilliant.
picture.
If I haven't spoken to you already,
Great.
I'd love to hear about what you're doing. Equally, for people in the room who would really like to do something but don't know where to start or just want to come and have a chat, that would be brilliant too.
Great. Does the report, I'm sorry if you said this, does the report contain case studies as well?
It's got references to people that we've talked to and some sort of mini case studies, but I think probably that would be a bit further down the line. This is the sort of first stage of what are the issues.
Yeah. And of course, there's the huge bank of case studies in
There are
the journals
case
as
studies,
well.
and we wanted to keep it as anonymous as possible at this stage. So we have got some, and there've been some really fantastic contributions. So you can read it, but we'd like more. So hopefully, if you're interested and you'd like to contribute to it, please do get in touch with us. Thank you.
Great. We've got a question at the back here from Liz, I'm just going to come around the back.
Just to reiterate that we will have the career pathways case study coming up for next spring. So if you're interested in contributing, just keep an eye on the schedule for that, or get in touch with us.
Hello, Liz Power, Director of Historic Buildings and Places and GEM Mentor. I think, thank you for telling us all about the information you've gathered. Fascinating, but not particularly surprising, I don't think, to anybody who's sat in this space. We're really good at telling each other. What's GEM's plans to tell everyone else? Rachel, one for you.
Thank you very much, Liz. That's a brilliant question. So we are almost ready with the report, not quite, so not quite as slick as we wanted to be, like launching it here now. But it will be out by the end of the month. And I think you're absolutely right. We need to be better at advocating for learning, to be having those conversations at a more strategic level, at a DCMS level, a DFE level. It's not a table that GEM's particularly been at in recent years, but we want to try and get there. And we've got other sector support organisations that are more engaged that can help us. Funnily enough, also, there's a lot of chat amongst think tanks at the moment. They're informing Labour. And I did have a really good conversation with a nice guy called Trevor recently, who's from one of those think tanks. So that also may well be a way forward, where if we can get some key messaging across, it may even end up in a future government policy. So yeah, watch this space. And thank you for raising that, because it's really, really important for us to do that.
And again, to chip in with that advocacy at the sort of policy level, please. I understand that you have some spaces on your board at the moment, don't you? And that's one of the things. Perhaps we can get some strong policy people on the board. But yeah, I think do you want to just say a little bit about your trustees?
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Yes, we're going to be sort of launching a number of vacancies for trustee roles. We also have already launched a treasurer vacancy. So if you or anyone you know has got the skills to be GEM treasurer, that would be fantastic too. But yeah, they'll probably in the next few weeks, Leanna actually is our company secretary, will be leading on this, leading up to the AGM in September. So I think we've got about at least four places. So we really welcome, applications from people from diverse backgrounds, in particular, who can advocate for that, for inclusion, better inclusion within the workforce, within learning. But if you want to just have an informal chat about it today, I'm around. So it'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, and having been a GEM trustee before, it's really rewarding. I cannot recommend it enough. We've got a last question. Time for one more question.
Hiya, it's Alice LePage. I'm the Museum Development Officer for Hampshire, Solent and the Isle of Wight. My question really kind of links with that about becoming a member of the board. What can we do as your biggest kind of advocates, your biggest supporters, to actually help you to get that agenda up on a national policy level?
Thanks, Alice. I mean, I think that's a really good question, difficult question, in terms of role of trustees. And it's really important, I think, that you give your trustees that agency to do that work and to have those conversations. Obviously, we've got our funders, Arts Council in particular, and that would probably be a really good place to start. I mean, they're actually doing a review of the Arts Council at the moment. So whether we can kind of influence that review or advocate for the place of learning within the Arts Council's role in the future, that might be one direction that I can think of. Museum development, has obviously changed a lot recently. I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to work in partnership with museum developments. That's something that we're also working on alongside the kind of governmental level that we've just talked about. So yeah, I think, we've always had a really strong collegiate spirit within the kind of GEM board, very kind of equitable, collegiate. So, I mean, it's great to have like some new expertise to come in who've got maybe access to different networks than we've had previously, because I think it's always about the networks and who you can speak to and who you can bring in to help GEM move forward and be a better advocate for learning in the sector.
Yeah, and supporting at that regional level with that too. And I think there's something very strong about sector support organisations, not just IPSOs, but together collaborating to be that voice, especially with a change of government.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, so I didn't mention this, but obviously we are a Four Nations organisation. We also have some international members, and we're doing a lot of work with Welsh Government at the moment. So it's not just about the English devolved organisations, it's also about Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and who we can talk to there as well.
Yeah. Lots to do, but you have made a fantastic start with this research. So thank you, all three of you, and the wider GEM team for coming today. That was great.